I'm Naomi Hall, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual summit on stress management for educators. Our goal here is to give you some powerful steps to reduce your stress and be able to gain some more quality time for yourself and for your family. So I'd like to introduce to you to Christian Moore. He is a internationally renowned speaker. He's an author of the Resilience Breakthrough 27 Tools for Turning Adversity into Action. And he also is the founder of the Why Try program that is in over 25,000 organizations. So, Christian, welcome.
Great to be with you.
Thank
Glad
you.
to be here.
So, you do a lot of work on internal resilience with students. How did those principles cross over to our stressed out teachers? Because you and I both know our teachers are kind of at the edge of stress, like the far edge of stress.
Yeah, yeah. You know, i- One of the big things that can have a huge impact on our resilience is if we're hard on ourselves. I've worked for teachers for 23 years, and they have really high self-awareness because the work they're doing is so important. Oftentimes, they'll be hard on themselves, and it's almost impossible to bounce back if we're hard on ourselves. When your head hits the pillow at night, if you focus on your mistakes, what you did wrong that day, your resilience goes way down. So one
Mhm,
thing I really emphasize with teachers is something I call self-grace. Usually grace
mhm,
comes from something outside of ourselves, but we realize that we have to give ourselves grace first, and we have to be able to forgive ourselves when we mess up. We're not perfect. You know, I always like to say, hey, teachers are in the arena. And if
mhm,
you're in the arena, you're going to be attacked. I mean, teachers have to deal with parents, with kids sometimes and their difficulties, and then administrators evaluating them. So teachers are in the arena, and if you're in the arena, you have to remind yourself you will be attacked, you will feel tremendous stress in the arena, but a lot of people aren't willing to get in that arena, and that's what makes teachers so special. Because if you're in the arena, keep your head up and give yourself grace, because very few people are willing to get into that arena, and when you have 25 kids or so in a classroom, that is no joke. So I just really want teachers to give themselves that forgiveness, that grace first, because you're not motivated, your anxiety will go up if you can't forgive yourself. So that's a big, huge, important thing. And I think that's internal. Self-forgiveness kind of comes internally, and I think that's how resilience and that internal resilience, kind of come together.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's something a lot of educators struggle with
Yeah, yeah,
is we can forgive other people, but ourselves, that's really a struggle. So you talk about four areas of internal resilience. Can you tell us a little bit about those and where educators can start with that?
yeah. So I started paying attention to, especially to students that had high trauma and
Mhm,
were thriving. Most social workers like me, we work with people with high trauma who are hurting themselves and others. But I started realizing kids that, mom might be in prison, dad's an alcoholic, the older brother abused them, whatever they're dealing with. I
mhm,
would meet these kids who had high trauma and were thriving, and we kept seeing four things pop up over and over again. We would see something called relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom. I'll just highlight real quick what those
mhm,
are. Relational resilience just means you go through the motions, you don't give up because another person needs you and you need them. And basically, there's research to show if two people say, "You're my best friend," your resilience is going to go up.
mhm,
It's that simple. We need at least minimum two relationships where we know we can lean on someone. They're unconditional relationships. So that's what relational resilience is that interdependence. For example, I have two kids. If I never got invited to speak again, I would go work in four different fast food restaurants because they need me, I need them. That makes me relationally resilient. The second place resilience comes from, and this, I believe every teacher in America, by the way, has a PhD in this, and that is street resilience. And that's where you use any type of disrespect, judgment, it could be a misunderstanding. It could be even your own past mistakes. You use that as fuel to propel yourself forward.
mhm.
I made it through college with severe learning disabilities. I was told I couldn't go to college because of my learning differences. And so I use that as motivation. That's street resilience, is when people say, hey, you can't do that. When I when I went to write a book, they told me less than 2% of books are published nationally. I had a 98% chance of failure. And, that's street resilience. You use that as motivation. You use disrespect. If you're in that arena I was talking about earlier, you will always have people attacking you. People have their own agenda, their own goals. You will be attacked. And then the third place resilience comes from, and I'm going to spend more time on this because I think this really answers your question. Out of these four sources, which is the most important for it is I believe the next one is resource resilience, and that's just maximizing the resources that are available with you. We tell people they got to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but they need to have the laces to pull themselves up with. When I study kids that are thriving, all of them are getting support, getting help from other people. Just yesterday, I was working with a young lady who's friends with my son that was going through a difficult time, and she needed to get into an apartment. Otherwise, she potentially could even be homeless. To get into an apartment, she needed the first and last month's rent. She needed a resource. She didn't have that kind of money. I know when I was her age, 18 years old, I didn't have the money for that. And somebody helped me out, and I was able to help her out with that first and last month's rent. Is that for us to thrive, now she can go to college just by her having a place to live. Massive doors open up for her because she has some basic needs. Now I was blessed to be in a position to help her do that, but people did that for me throughout my life, provided those resources for me. And you cannot be resilient on an island. You have to be able to get help from other people. So resource is just accessing your talents, your abilities, people around you. It can be information. It's also kind of the purpose of education. Education shows people their resources through knowledge, getting more information. And then the last one is rock bottom resilience. And that's when you're at your lowest point. You believe in your ability to change. You put one foot in front of another when you have every reason to shut down. And rock bottom resilience really starts with a question. You have to ask yourself, how do I use this rock bottom moment as a resource, as my best friend? Resilience takes place in the striving. It's not a destination. So in that rock bottom moment, you don't land on resilience. Resilience happens through showing up to that classroom, when that kid's yelling at you, to not yell back at that student, to be patient. That's where resilience takes place. I wrote a book on resilience. I've never reached resilience. It's an effort effect. It's a striving to be resilient. But I want to go back to, those are the four sources of resilience. So we want to make sure every teacher has access to those four sources of resilience. I read lots of books on resilience that told me the attributes: hard work, determination, perseverance. But I wanted to know, where does it come from internally? And that's where that relational, that street, resource, and rock bottom. But the one I really want to emphasize for teachers is resource resilience. And it's interesting. I've been looking at some research lately about what's one of the biggest things that impact our mental health, what's one of the biggest things that lowers anxiety. And as a clinician, I look at it from kind of a technical standpoint, but I'm blown out of the water. When I look at this data, I'm almost afraid to say it because people are going to roll their eyes and go, that's the biggest X factor to lower stress and anxiety. And there's some pretty powerful data, compelling data showing that the most important things that you can do to help lower stress, lower anxiety, is get enough sleep. Get sleep. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm ADHD. I have lots of energy, and a lot of nights I average 3 to 4 hours of sleep. I'm a national speaker, so I've been paying attention to, hey, what is my stress level like when I get 8 hours of sleep when I'm in front of a larger audience versus getting 3 hours of sleep. So sleep is a big deal. The other thing they find is a big deal is enough calories, is food. Like I said, they go, wait, I'm a therapist, I'm a clinician, I spent 8 years in college, and you're telling me the biggest thing to impact my own personal anxiety, stress, and mental health. And I want to come up with some complicated model, some beautiful, because that's the world I work in, right? And so I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me it's food. Make sure you eat lunch, you get enough exercise. Exercise massively impacts. And I'm almost embarrassed to say it. I want to come up with some, really beautiful theory or something, because that's the world I operate in. But I have to, as a clinician, as a clinical social worker, I got to tell you all the truth. It is movement, it is sleep, and it is calories, enough calories. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty. So I've last couple of weeks, I've seen the data on that. I've been applying that to my life, and I'll tell you, it is extremely, extremely powerful. And then the other thing along with that, there's another resource we can tap into, which one
Mhm.
I'm going to share one theoretical thing that I think is really important, but I promise what I'm about to say is not more important than food, sleep, and calories. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and the next one is, and by the way, hydration is the other one on that too. They were saying, which I thought was really interesting. I don't drink near enough water, but now I got to share one theory thing with you because this is my passion. So, but it's interesting is also a powerful resource that a lot of people have overlooked their whole lives is the ability to create productive outcomes with negative emotions. It's kind of like a car battery. You can't charge a battery with just a positive connection, and you can't charge a battery with just the negative connection. The battery charges because the positive and the negative comes to get together, right? That they need each other. And so your resilience goes up if you can take sadness, depression, hurt, stress, anxiety, and channel that in productive ways. There's no law in the universe that says you cannot take a negative emotion and create a productive outcome with, Viktor Frankl did it, during the Holocaust.
Mhm.
Christopher Reeves did it when he was paralyzed. Oprah did it with emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. She took the anger, the rage of that and says, I'm going to create healing in this world. Dr. King did it with the civil rights movement. Again, Mandela did it. It's, again, as I started studying people who are highly resilient, all of them maximize their negative emotions, sometimes far more than even their positive emotions. But I spent 8 years in college, $65,000, pretty much only learning positive psychology. What we say to ourselves is going to lead to our actions, it's going to lead to our behavior. So we probably just want to say positive things to ourselves. But when I started studying people who are highly resilient, they created productive outcomes again with those negative emotions. And if you think about it, you have twice the fuel source to be resilient, to lower stress, to bounce back if you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. So I've never shared this before, but with resource resilience, I would say the ability to channel your negative emotions and get enough sleep and enough food and enough hydration, those two things would be a knockout punch to dealing with stressors.
Oh my goodness. I like what you're saying, the research that you're showing us is exactly what I've been seeing too. And it's exactly what I teach to my clients. It's like, you got to sleep. Like, trust me.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, the research is incredible on sleep, movement.
And a lot of teachers say to me, "Hey, Christian, I'm up at night because I'm thinking about this one student that's in crisis." We all know that kid that
Mhm.
has high trauma. It's keeping us up at night. And one thing I tell teachers, and one of my close friends works with lots of veterans. I point out to them, look, those problems, those challenges those kids are facing, they would be there whether you're in that classroom or not. And as this clinical social worker, I've done over 10,000 hours of therapy, and it would keep me up at night. And I'll tell you today, it took me, I didn't do this overnight, but I have to remind myself, those problems transcend me. I'm there to serve, I'm there to help. I can't control everything. I can't take on that pain. And so not, I think teachers sometimes think I have to stay empathetic all the time.
Mhm.
And when you're in a live setting with them, be as empathetic as possible. But you have to turn it off when you walk away so that you can reach the most amount of students. So I just want to put a little plug there on that.
Yeah, that's so important. Out of your four, I mean, I love all those resources. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying and the importance there. Street resilience and rock bottom, like, I relate to those so much. And I feel like
Yeah,
most educators do, of like, we've been through such a tough stretch in the last few years. It's been challenging.
yeah,
The level of respect for educators is just not there. So those two I just really relate to. So how can we really use your principles to move forward in this like really stressful environment where we need to have that rock bottom resilience, where we need to have that street resilience? How can we move forward with those?
yeah. Again, going back to rock bottom, again, it really starts with that question is, saying to yourself, how do I use this pain? How do I use this suffering? I always tell people the number one thing a person has to have to be resilient. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. You have to have something to bounce back from. You have to have suffering. And so I know that doesn't sound real motivational. Sometimes people tease me. I'm like the opposite of a motivational speaker. I tell the truth. Resilience is the ability to bounce back.
Mhm.
So you have to have something to bounce back from. And kind of the gateway, the introduction to being resilient is that question: how do I use this? For example, my anxiety, I'm a speaker, so before I speak, I've had panic attacks in front of audiences, So before I speak, I don't fight the anxiety. I say, okay, Mr. Anxiety, you've been with me my entire life. My mom had an anxiety disorder. My mom couldn't leave the house because of anxiety. So some pretty intense genetic anxiety in my family. And so I embrace it. I walk with the stress. I walk with it. If I fight the anxiety or I fight the stress, my stress goes up.
Mhm.
And so in those usually my stress is the highest in those rock bottom moments. So when I'm in those rock bottom moments, I want to do a couple things. I want to pay attention to how I'm feeling, and then I want to say, okay, I'm feeling highly depressed right now. I'm feeling high anxiety, but I mean, my power as a human being is to ask questions. We know it's interesting in education. We know the most important thing in education is for children to learn how to critically think, right? To question things, to have critical thoughts, and to process, why things work the way. So we have to be critical. We have to question our own thoughts. We don't control the thoughts that pop into our head. If I say, don't think of a pink bear, everybody's thinking of a pink bear. Thoughts just pop into our head over and over again. And so, sometimes for a lot of my life, I took ownership of the thoughts that popped into my head when I started understanding, wait a minute, I don't control what pops into my head. I control how I walk with those thoughts, how I use those thoughts. And so that's a really important thing with rock bottom resilience. The next thing on street resilience that I think is so important, again, street resilience is using any type of disrespect, judgment. It could be inequality issues, anything where you feel disrespected. And it's interesting, teachers, again, they should be making the LeBron James type of money. But for the amount of disrespect and with teachers, and we're losing far too many teachers, and these teachers are heroes. I'm begging teachers every time I give a speech. I beg them to please stay. We need them to stay. And but it's interesting, they're assessed by administrators, and I think that's important. We all need feedback. They're assessed by administrators. They're often scrutinized by parents, and often the students' traumas can be projected onto the teachers. And it's interesting. When I was growing up, the person I abused the most was my mom, because I knew she was the safest person. I knew my mom was going to be unconditional with me. And so raising kids myself, it goes back and forth. Sometimes it's dad, sometimes it's my wife, Wendy. But when we're safe with someone, sometimes that's who we project our trauma on. And so I know when I've done work in classrooms and kids are coming at me really intense, I try to say to myself, hey, this kid is acting out so intense with me because he knows he can't mess up with me. When I was in a classroom doing some teaching, I would take my door frame, I would polka dot the door frame, my candy striped it. I would tell the students, when you come into my classroom, I'm only going to focus on what's right with you. You can go talk to another teacher, the vice principal, about what's wrong. There's no shortage of people that will talk to you about what's wrong with you. But when you're in my classroom, when you're around Christian Moore, I'm only going to focus on what's right with you. Now, if you do this, the kids always get worse because they're going to test it and be like, no way, you can focus on what's right with me. But again, as I do that, as I focus on what's right with this child, you see their motivation go up tremendously. And teachers, in a weird way, I try to help teachers understand that it's almost a compliment when kids feel safe around you. And if you can continue to communicate that message to them, hey, when you're in my classroom, this is a safe space. I know your stress will go down, the kids' stress will go down. We have a whole thing in Wide Try we teach called surrendering the one-up relationship that I think has a powerful impact on street resilience. Is you just let a child know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. Often kids with my background, we feel one down in the relationship. We see the teacher up here, the administrators up here. It could be the judge or the probation officer. Everybody's up here. We're down here. And I wanted to know, why does a kid behave in one classroom and act out in another classroom? And it really comes down to this ability to surrender the one-up relationship. And in Why Try, we have lots of strategies on how to surrender this one-up relationship. But street resilience, again, is the ability to use judgment, to use all these things coming at you. And again, you really don't control the school administrators. You definitely do not control the parents. And the kids are going to show up with what issues they have. And so that's why that self-grace for you, loving yourself, reminding yourself you can only do so much. You're not superhuman. But right now, teachers are being expected to be superhuman. And oftentimes they're put in positions where they can't even teach. And we have to make sure the purpose of education is knowledge, is to be able to think critically. And we have to give teachers the power to truly teach kids. And that's the great battle. The other thing around street resilience that's really, really powerful is, you know, when you're being disrespected by another human being, you know, how do you show kindness when someone's judging you, disrespecting you, attacking you personally? You know, how do you get along with people? I get that question all the time. I'll teach people in workshops relational resilience, and they'll say, well, Christian, how am I relationally resilient with an administrator that maybe doesn't like me, or a teacher that's attacking me, or these students? And I'm actually working on a book right now on how to get along with anybody. And there's three things we have to do. We have to lean out with, and this has a huge impact on personal anxiety, personal stress. Because again, throughout the day, you're going to interact with people all day long. If you have tools to deal with them, it really can impact that street resilience. So one of the first things you have to do is make sure that you first are more unconditional than conditional. Students love to be, again, with teachers. They love to be with people who are more unconditional. You know, conditional love is, I'll love you if dot, 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 dot. I'll love you if you have the same views as me, the same culture, beliefs, background. I'll love you if you're willing to jump through my hoops. That is conditional love. Unconditional love is, I love you where you're standing, with your flaws, with your weaknesses. And again, what makes us human is the fact that we have flaws, we have weaknesses. That's the birthplace of humanity. That's what makes us human. You would be AI, you would be artificial intelligence, essentially, if you didn't mess up, if you didn't make mistakes. And so I know at 53 years old, I try to only spend time with people in my personal time that are unconditional. There's no shortage of conditional people on this planet. And so pay close attention. If you have 6 friends, make sure 4 of those 6 friends are unconditional versus conditional. And your stress will go down, your anxiety will go down. If those teachers, all the teachers listen to me, if you pay close attention to who you spend time with, when you're in that classroom, it's highly conditional. In your personal time, don't spend time, don't tolerate hate, unconditional love, judgment. I'll love you dot 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 dot. That is a huge thing to lower teachers' anxiety, because the minute they walk into that school, so many situations are conditional. The next thing they have to do is realize, for me to get along with anybody, I have to realize I can be wrong. As I raise my kids, I did an experiment with them. I should never have done this, but I raised my kids, and from day one, I told my kids, hey, your dad could be wrong. So they'll ask me a question, they'll go to school, they'll learn something. I'll say, well, this is your dad's view. This is this group's view. This is this group's view. This is, this tribe's views, all these different views people have. But I'll say the one thing I know for sure is your dad can be wrong. You have to go do research on this. You have to be a critical thinker. You have to research this stuff for yourself and follow your morals, what you think's right. But I tell you what, but if I'm not wrong, I can justify when we say, hey, why does someone justify harming another human being? It's because they can't be wrong. If you can't be wrong and your walk is a more superior walk, then you have complete justification to discriminate against someone, to judge someone, to harm someone. So the ability to be wrong is one of the most important things we can learn. You think about this in a classroom setting. You think about Elon Musk just set up all those rockets, right? And they blew up. Well, he talked about all his progress comes from being wrong about the decisions he made as he built the rocket. Education advances 10 times faster if we can be wrong. It's learning from the mistakes. So our classrooms need to be laboratories where we can be wrong. And if we can be wrong, we can get along with anybody. We can do things that don't harm people. But watch, when people are harming people, almost always they're doing it in the justification of being right. And you'll see that everywhere. It's having that awareness. And then the third thing that you have to do is be able to see things from 4 or more perspectives. There's your view, there's my view, There's our combined view, which is three perspectives, but it's not till we see that fourth perspective
Mhm.
that we get past our blind spot. So to give you an example, like if you're driving your car down the street, right? You have the rear view mirror right there in front of you. You got your two side mirrors, but it's not till you turn around and see that blind spot
Mhm.
do you see the full perspective. If I'm standing looking at a tree, if I want to paint an entire tree, I got to stand in four spots to see the whole tree. Even this computer I'm talking to right now, I could not see this entire computer unless I stood in four different places. And so when I'm judging something or I'm trying to make a harsh decision, especially about a human being or about a theory or an idea, I got to make sure that I'm seeing it from at least four or more perspectives. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to harm another person. My anxiety is going to go up. But the ability to see things from four or more perspectives can massively reduce stress, massively reduce anxiety. And classrooms are the laboratories to look at things from multiple perspectives. That's the purpose of education, is the more information we have about something, the more we can solve something. My son right now is with a surgeon getting his knee worked on, and that surgeon has got the ability to see my son's knee from many, many perspectives to solve that problem. And that's why this guy's a great surgeon, right? He has to problem solve the reality of the crisis he has in front of them. And so I think classrooms are powerful, powerful places for that. So those are specific tools for street resilience. And again, teachers have no shortage of street resilience. Every teacher has a PhD in it. I just want to, make sure they have those tools.
Thank you so much. You have hit on so many practical points for us of steps teachers can take. I have a couple quick questions for you that I did not share with you that are
Right.
just kind of a couple fun questions for us to learn a little bit about you is what are you reading? What are you watching? And what are you listening to right now?
Wow, wow. So I just downloaded, well, I'm a couple of things. I'm reading a childhood hero of mine, hockey player named Gordie Howe. I'm reading his bio right now, and I just downloaded a book. And by the way, Gordie Howe has an incredible story of resilience. Grew up in tremendous poverty, all kinds of challenges, and just a powerful example of maximizing. He tapped into disrespect. He tapped into resources. Just amazing, amazing story of resilience. And then I'm reading a book. It's called Radical. It's about what I was just talking about, how to get along with everybody. But it's like, oh my gosh, I have to pull it up. But it's radical. What is it called? Radical connection or something. It's about a way to connect with human beings in a more unconditional way. So I was excited to see, people are really starting to focus on that. I think what we're seeing in our society is, hey, if we're going to advance, we have to look at ways to focus on what's right with each other, not what's wrong with each other. And so it's a book about that. And then what was the other question you had for me?
What are you reading, watching, and listening to?
Watching. What am I watching? What have I been watching recently? I've been watching a bunch of there's like two things on Netflix that are about antiquing. So how I deal, and this is another huge thing that ties to lowering stress, is I'm so engaged in education. So when I travel, I find old antiques and I paint them. So I'm watching a bunch of antique kind of roadshow things,
Yeah.
just because I'm inspired by antiques. But I combine art and antiquing for my mental health to
Mhm.
lower my stress. I think it's so important that teachers
Mhm.
have an outlet completely outside of education. So that's my outlet right there. That's what I'm watching, and it's part of my therapy. And the third one was, what was the other one?
What are you listening to?
What am I listening to? I've been listening to Jack White. My son introduced me. He's a big music guy. He just recently introduced me to to Jack White, the White Stripes, and it's music I never grew up listening to. I grew up in between DC and Baltimore.
Mhm.
Uh, didn't Wasn't exposed to that, but I'm a huge fan of his music because he blends every type of genre, from folk to rock, and he blends all these genres together. So if you have not listened to Jack White, highly, highly recommend him as an artist. Amazing, amazing music. He's become one of my favorite musician. So please check him out.
All right, great. I love it. I always get new ideas when I ask those questions. That's why I ask them. Now, you have a free gift for our listeners. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have, so all those in earshot, we're going to give you a digital copy of the Resilience Breakthrough. My publisher just told me over 100,000 copies are in print now. And so I'm very excited. That's an example of street resilience right there. I was told, you're not going to be able to get this nationally published. You'll have to self-publish. And so again, there's always going to be haters, always going to be people judging you. And now over 100,000 copies in print. So we're going to make sure everybody gets access to these 4 sources of resilience. And we have 27 strategies and tools on how to access relational resilience, street, and resource and rock bottom. So we'll make sure everybody gets access to that and a digital copy. And then we have a webinar series that we do, a couple of webinars every month. We bring in some of the top, similar to what we're doing here, we bring in some of the top experts in the country. We've been doing it since COVID. I think we have a couple hundred of these now. And just, I promise you, this is incredible resource for teachers. So please, we'll access that. And then we have a parenting guide on everything I just talked about. How do we teach these skills in the home? And so we took everything I just talked to you all about in this presentation, and we put it in a format that parents can teach these 4 sources of resilience in the home with activities and a bunch of resources. So that's for free as well. Something we developed before COVID. That's something we're going to charge for. But when the COVID crisis hit, we knew people needed. That's been downloaded now almost 100,000 times. So please access these resources. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing to advocate for teachers. She's not going to tell you this. I had a phone call with her the other day, and her passion to help teachers lower their stress, to be able to stay in that classroom. I mean, your sincerity, your focus, and really trying to solve these issues. You're my hero. I want to thank you for what you're doing to make a difference in education. And I know you have a PhD. There's 100 other things you could go do to enrich yourself, to make life 100 times easier for you. But you're in the arena, and I want to thank you for staying in the arena and caring about our fellow teachers and fighting the fight for these teachers. You're a hero. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Christian. And thank you, everyone that listened. We have about 19 other of these that are happening, so don't miss them. They're on different topics related to stress management from experts like Christian, who are in it, doing the work and helping you. So take advantage of that free gift, that free resource that he's providing for you. He has some amazing, I actually just listened to one of the webinars this morning. And it was fantastic. It was talking about social emotional learning in the classroom and how we do that, and what you were just talking about, that relating to students and building those relationships and just the importance of that. So don't miss our other interviews. I thank you, Christian, for joining us. Thank you for listening, and I hope everyone has a great day.